Hello, everyone, and welcome to hockeyprospects.com YouTube channel. I'm Jérôme Bérubé, and I'm joined by Brad Allen. And today's we're going to take a look at our second team, the Boston Bruins. We're going to take a look at their prospect pool, Brad. So I'll just put the ranking on the screen, Brad. Just maybe your first thoughts on the rankings that we work on. Um, not the best prospect pool, but pretty some interesting guys. I think the Bruins are obviously the James Hagen's pick will be he's the top guys that they have. But they always find guys. They do draft a lot from Sweden, a lot of from the U.S. college, USHL rank. They have I find they have a quite of a unique strategy. Um, for scouting. Um, I was looking at Hagens, Letourneau, Wilmore also, both play all of them playing at Boston College, and they also have like three more guys at Boston College. So yeah, they have six. There's six Bruins prospect playing at Boston College, which is pretty interesting.
That's got to be a record.
Yeah.
There's no way it's not a record.
So let's take a look at that prospect pool here. Maybe your first take here with the Bruins here.
Well, they're kind of in a difficult position because they're trying to figure out exactly what they are as a team still after losing some of their core pieces, and they have to find out if McAvoy can come back from his injuries and look the part of the true number one D, and that goes for Jeremy Swayman as well. Is Jeremy Swayman a split starter or a full-time starter? Is he as good as initially when he came to the league as he looked? Is that the real version, or the implosion that I'm sure the implosion that happened last year is certainly not the real version? But does he fall in between that, or does he come right back and is one of the top 5-7 goalies in the league again? These questions are enormously important, and they're going to be answered this season. And I think will ultimately determine if Boston decides to really go scorched earth and then really pump in new prospects on their pool and look more like the Anaheim team we just discussed down the road with getting higher draft picks. The main thing I'll say is it happens to every team. It looks like it's happening to Boston. Let's start off with the 10th seed here, Jérôme. That's Fabian Lysell. Listen, we all miss. Fabian Lysell does not look like he's going to be the part for the Bruins. He's a first-round pick. That's really tough for a franchise that at the time was contending when they drafted him. So it's one of those situations where Lysell needed to hit. It's looking like this is the end of the road. Like this is his last shot to me with Boston and Boston's organization. He has not improved in terms of how he operates and plays on really both sides of the puck. Nearly the level he needs to be a full-time NHLer up to this point. One issue with him, although he has a phenomenal skating base and he can be extremely dynamic off the rush, great set of hands, super tenacious at times, he's always been unable to mitigate risk offensively. He also has difficulty with his spatial awareness, and both of those things lead to a tremendous amount of mistakes and turnover rates that simply can't happen because, yeah, he's dynamic at times, but he's not that talented, right? He's not talented enough to put up with the errors. So it's all about understanding where he needs to quiet his game down offensively so that he can operate more efficiently. And, again, the production's there in the AHL, but it's a different beast, as you all know, in the NHL. So that's been an unfortunate situation with this organization, since Lysell is not hit. And that means, as you know, Jérôme, like that puts a ton of responsibility right now on those top two guys. Like James Hagens absolutely, unequivocally must hit. Dean Letourneau, who this is a fascinating prospect that we'll get into here. This is another example player that absolutely must hit, even though he is coming off a season that most people would argue is a really just one of the worst seasons he possibly could have had for numerous reasons. So that we go to 3. If you look at Fraser Minton, that's the first slot I look at and say, at least you're guaranteed a player. Might be a fourth line center. We'll see. He might have enough offense for third line center responsibilities, but at least he'll play. Like Fraser Minton's going to play for sure. Then you look down the list, and the only other player I'm like, I really think he has a chance. The floor is extremely high would be Dan's Lockmelis. But Lockmelis is certainly looking more, I would say, like a fourth-line energy player at this stage. But they need bodies that can really play. So those are two that will play. James Hagens, for all of you that are unaware of us, we have a 30-minute breakdown of James Hagens from last year's draft. We fundamentally disagree with basically the entire industry on this player. We think that he's a perfect example, honestly, of how little people actually scout. I'll call it out. I'll say it as it is. I watched 40 games of his playmaking last season. It was incredibly mixed. He had nowhere near the season people thought he had. He was a perimeter player. He had difficulty with his handling rates in transition. He had difficulty with his playmaking. He forced a ton of play, and he did not look like he structurally improved in any capacity from the last season. He's also not as gifted in straight lines as he is when it comes to his multi-directional skating. Like, he has phenomenal edge work. He has exceptional linear crossovers. He can pivot on a dime. He can stay on balance, which is critical for a primary playmaker, which he is. But in terms of his overall peak power output in open ice, it is lacking. And I bring that up because defense could get back in front of him. And when they did, he had unforced error rates that were incredibly high. So that has to be cleaned up here. Now, can they be cleaned up? Absolutely. He can turn a corner here and look way more of the part of what he was expected of him, which was a top 3 pick in last season's draft. His season, Jérôme, reminds me a little bit of a player that you called out early. I'll never forget this what you said about him, and that was Atu Ratu out of Vancouver there, who's going to play the third line of Vancouver. I remember Jérôme told me, for everybody listening, when that season started, he was expected to be a top 2-3 pick, and Jérôme watched him in Liga, and he told me that he thought there was not a chance that he could be that, and came down to the skating base, and we were definitely correct on that front. So with Hagens, it was pretty similar. Jérôme came to me and said, Brad, we got a problem. James Hagens doesn't look like a top 3 pick, and it wasn't Atu Ratu type of fall, but it was from a public perspective, to the actual reality of what this player was doing on the ice. I thought it was pretty similar to how the Atu Ratu situation with the hype and just how he was not performing nearly up to the expectation that people thought. What about the middle guys there, Jérôme? Where are you with Poitras, Moore, Blanash, Brunet? What do you think of the middle crop there?
By the way, if people want more Hagens scouting information from us, they can go back and watch our draft video. Like Brad mentioned, we went for like 30 minutes on him. So I'll say this: I'm curious to see how he plays this year with no Ryan Leonard, no Gabriel Perreault on his line. He didn't really have to drive. He didn't have to drive the play last year because when he played with those two, Ryan Leonard was the driver. So without this year, he's going to be the top guy on his line. No matter who he plays with, he's going to be the top guy. So we'll have a real answer if he's ever going to be a play driver, I think.
Also, Jérôme, just to top up on what you just said, it really matters. I thought Ryan Leonard and him had zero chemistry.
Oh, yeah.
It's not good chemistry. I thought he actually played better with Dean Letourneau. In the smaller sample, and I really thought Dean Letourneau and him played well. So maybe that's something to build upon. And one more point before I give it back to you that we should have mentioned, I forgot to, is it's interesting seeing so many players that are in one organization playing on one college team, because it gives them a different level of chemistry coming in to the NHL relative to most other teams. It's almost like they've built their own program through Boston College, and they're like, this is basically like the minors for the Boston system. It's crazy. It's really interesting though. Like theoretically, it makes sense to do from a development perspective, because imagine how comfortable every player would be with each other. Like they all know each other coming in. So I think that probably benefits them more than anything, as long as their ice is.
It's pretty interesting. I don't think. Like of those 6 players, I'm guessing maybe 2 or 3 will end up being NHLer, but we'll see. Letourneau, as you mentioned, bad year last season, should have not been in college. He was not ready for college, even more so in a big time program like Boston College. If you're not ready, they're just not going to play you. So, should have been, one more year of junior for him. He was drafted as a long-term project, and he still is. He looks like, unless he really, really, really improve this upcoming season, looks like he's going to be a 4-year, college guy. Or maybe 3, but like he's definitely not turning pro after this upcoming season. Like he needs some time. But the tools are there for him. Like he's 6'7". He can do some good things offensively. But consistency is, even in his draft year, consistency was not always there in a very low level of hockey. Like, remember, like he was playing, basically Canadian high school hockey, and then go from there to like hockey East. Like that's a major jump, and he was not ready for it. But the tools, the potential is still there, and
He was also injured too. There was an injury there for a couple months with his wrist, which cannot help in any capacity, especially when you're struggling offensively. Last thing you want is a wrist injury. Yeah. So nothing worked for him.
So you mentioned Minton, acquired from Toronto. Like as safe as it gets as a prospect. I think like he's going to be, worst case, he's your 4th line center. Maybe he ends up your 3rd line center. Poitras is an interesting one. I have a hard time. Is he good enough to be a top 6 guy in the NHL? I don't know. Does he fit what you want as a 3rd line player? I don't know. He's not the biggest guy. The skating is not like the best. Also, it was one reason we didn't have him like that high in his draft year. We didn't have much time for him. So he kind of, to be fair, he kind of surprised us the year after that, because we're like,
it's improved. Yeah. His skating for sure has improved. I've talked to some of their staff about it. They were very impressed with him. I mean, coming in, I talked to one of the staff on Boston. They told me they didn't even think the skating was a weakness, because it improved that much over one summer. They didn't even know it was considered a weakness during his draft year. Like, that's how impressive it was in terms of his development. Yeah. And that was the missing link. So it's pretty impressive. Some of these kids, like they find a way to make up for their deficiencies, or the attribute we think is behind the most. They can make up lost ground pretty quick if they get to work.
Yeah.
So the other thing, Jérôme, about Poitras, I feel like the player type is super rare. Like Matthias Michelli's trying to pull it off here in Toronto. Like he looked phenomenal for Utah not when they were in Utah, but you know what I mean? In that organization, he looked the part for 2 years there. Then he fell apart. And Max Domi, I think, is probably the best example of this player type, where you're talking about like a dynamic playmaking winger who can do a whole lot in transition, makes his teammates better, phenomenal passing rates, can make dynamic high danger passes per 60 at a much higher rate than most other forwards. But if the playmaking dies, they die. Like the shot, Michelli doesn't shoot a puck enough. Max Domi shooting mechanics, they're actually pretty impressive, but a sense of timing and how to operate within that timing. The only time we've ever seen it be successful is in Montreal for that 1 year where he blew up. And then Poitras runs into this territory of that type of player. Another example, this would be Andrew Basha out of Calgary, I would say, Jérôme. Yeah. Another example, you're talking about a rush winger who relies almost exclusively on his playmaking. It's very difficult for this type of player at this size if they're not a dual threat to make it. But Poitras is very smart. He's incredibly intelligent. You got to be to make it with this play style. So we'll see.
Will Moore, a guy that he took in the 2nd round this past June. To be fair, I had lots of difficulty with that player last year. Not my favorite type of player. I felt like he was, offensively just didn't do enough for me, and I thought he was, a bit too passive at times, and the skating was like not the best. But the kid is 6'2", 6'3", pretty raw. And if I base myself on what I've seen from kids from the program the past few years, when they leave the program, they get much better. I'm a bit afraid of what Wilmore might do to me at Boston College this year. It might make me look a bit bad. So we had him ranked 63rd. Boston took him 51. So definitely we did not have the same concern that I had over him. So if they took him 51st, they probably had him as a top 35, top 40 prospect on the
mid-30s,
yeah,
most likely.
yeah. So we'll see with more, but based on what I've seen from kids from the program, once they leave the program, they get much better. We saw it last year with Bensagi, Aperson with Saginaw. So maybe more will be the next one, to really improve, post NTDP. I'll maybe say a few words about Frédéric Brunet from, he's been formerly from the Q, plays, I think he has played 2 years with Providence. I think he's going to challenge for some NHL games this year. Really good athlete, can skate really well, covers a lot of ice. Um, I thought the offense was a bit average in his draft year. Creativity was not always on point, but he was raw, and he did make some pretty good progress. Just the season after, he had a big year. So pretty nice 5th-round pick by the Bruins in 2022, and I think he's really close to get some NHL games with the Bruins this season. Like actually, it's he might make the Bruins out of training camp. Who knows? He's right there. So he's an interesting one. Maybe Brad, you want to touch on a few other guys on that we have here that we have ranked here.
Yeah, sure. So I'll mention Vashek Blinash there. He's like the wild card, dark horse for me out of this pool. He never managed to get into our book. The irony is one of the reasons that he didn't get in our book is because I had to do such an enormous playmaking sample of James Higgins. So it comes full circle here. But he's a very interesting talent. I was watching him in J18 last season. 6'4", naturally pretty gifted. Kind of thinks the game like an offensive player more than a defensive player. He's more of an offensive defenseman at this stage in his development, who can attack and activate off the rush. Phenomenal set of hands that I've watched him here in the early going of J20, and everything looks improved. It just physically, he looks different. He looks extremely comfortable, extremely confident. He's always had a moxie to him. There's always been that swagger to this kid where he thinks he can make very high-end plays at will. And so far in J20, I think Boston's probably pretty happy with what they're seeing. This is like for sure the most underrated prospect in their system, and a player in 3 to 4 years, you can quote me on it, that we'll probably be talking about as he enters that long look where he dominates the AHL, and then it's all about trying to figure out if they can round out his defensive game enough and get the retrieval rates up enough. But he's a very, very interesting talent.
Yeah,
and one that should have been in our book 100%.
Yeah.
But
sometimes it happens. Some guys they fell from the cracks. Well, I want to say something about him. Like as soon as he got drafted, I had like flashback of Mason Lohrei.
Similar. Yeah.
When Lohrei was drafted by the Bruins, he was a second-year eligible player that was not in our book, and the Bruins took him in the second round. And then, with this kid, I'm like, 6'4", 6'5" with some skill and some confidence with the puck. I was like, if the Bruins, we'll see if the Bruins have done it again, but the Lohrei pick is looking really good for them.
Yeah.
So. Anybody, maybe you want to mention, the Latvian kid, maybe, or the other Swedish kid before we.
Lockmealis, Lockmealis, I thought was a great pick at the time. He reminds me a little bit of Sikora in the Ranger system, in the sense that you're getting a smaller, versatile hybrid center who can play the wing or center position, brings a tremendous amount of pace and energy, and is relentless, never backs down. I always thought he looked very good in the Latvia uniform at the U20 level and at the international level in general. And I think, even honestly, I'm looking at this now, 8th might be a bit too low for him, because there's just the floor is so much higher to me than even Vashek Blinash or more at this stage. But I'm with you on the Will Moore front. He's one for me where, out of any prospect that if he turns a corner can make us look horrible, Will Moore is absolutely on that list. And the problem with the program is, as Jérôme mentioned, specifically last year, it was a tire fire structurally. Like, no, I felt like no kid developed. I felt like no kid got better on the program in any capacity. The only one that seemed to stay consistent was McKinney. The rest seemed like it was just hit and miss all over the map. And you just never know until you get them out of that system. And Moore does have a lot of talent. Like, he can make plays. He's a natural playmaker. He's a gifted thinker of the game. Not the highest offensive ceiling, but he's one for me too, Jerome, where it comes down to like fast twitch development. Like, he needs to become a more explosive athlete. He needs to fill out his frame. He was very lanky. He was easily knocked off pucks last season. His forechecking rates are and he needs some of that because, again, he's not like a dynamic top line player. I'll also finish, I think, on the most significant aspect of development with Dean Letourneau. So I went back to St. Andrews College because I was pretty interested in like what happened to this player. Was any of this predictable? Like the fact he was going to be this poor at Boston College, and there was some indicators there that were going to suggest that this was going to happen. The main one, which admittedly I didn't pick up on in his initial draft season when it was probably the right time to do so, but I watched every handling play he had in transition at St. Andrews College. His handling rates were abysmal. Now, when you're a 6'7", 200-pound kid at 17 years of age, your handling rates aren't going to be what they actually are, right? Your dexterity, it's not going to be nearly as developed as it will be when you're 21, 22 years of age. It just comes down to nerve signaling. When you're that tall, it takes longer for your nerves to fully become operational and functional. Like, for instance, Elmer Soderblom always had his hands, but that is incredibly rare. It was one of the best indicators that Elmer Soderblom was actually going to become what he is now, which looks like a top 9 like crazy power forward, like one of the most unique unicorn power forwards in the history of the game. Like, he's on the top line in camp here with Detroit. We'll see what happens, but the handling was always there. Dean Letourneau's was not. With Tage Thompson's shot, specifically from his wheelhouse, was always there. He was always that power play threat. He always had that shot quality. That was the translatable component that we knew was always there, right? Dmitry Voronkov, that one's trickier. That one's a lot trickier. The skating wasn't there. He was nowhere near as efficient or as smart looking as he is now. And the handling was all over the map, as was the shot and the playmaking. Nothing was solidified. So that one was way harder to figure out. Dean Letourneau falls more in the Voronkov camp because, again, the handling's not there. The shot is incredibly inconsistent, always was. The only thing that was really ever consistent was the playmaking. The problem is, in order to be able to pass the puck at the college level successfully, you need to be able to create feints. You got to be able to create speed differentials. You have to be able to untelegraph your intentions. Once you telegraph what you're going to do with a puck, if you're massive, it's much easier to collapse on somebody because the bigger you are, the harder it is to be evasive. Dean Letourneau does not play a power game. He's a finesse-oriented forward. The problem with Letourneau, Mark Edwards has talked about this, is that he's 6'7", but he plays like he's 5'9" sometimes. So with Boston, what they have to do is figure out how to turn him into at least a hybrid forward, meaning he will occasionally learn how to cut through hands with his frame, occasionally understand how to protect the puck with his frame, and do it the right stages on the ice, but then still have that blend of feints, the ability to be able to be elusive and remain evasive at that right time. Because if he doesn't have that, if he doesn't know how to blend it, then there's no chance he can become something similar to, let's say, a Matthew Nyes, who does blend both. And he absolutely needs that. If he doesn't have that, then this kid's never going to translate successfully. The good news is, though, when you compare his handling rates at Boston College relative to St. Andrews, they did improve. And then his off-puck play improved. And he did fill out somewhat. So the next stage here is to figure out how to get the feints implemented and how to create a hybrid power forward and how to understand when to be tenacious to when to be finesse oriented and to how to use his speed correctly, because that's one of his gifts is his skating and he doesn't use it right now. So yeah, a deep dive Letourneau this offseason because I found him pretty fascinating. One of the most unique players in the game and who comes from St. Andrews College and plays Big Ten, right? Like nobody. So it's one of those situations where when you have unique unicorns, it can teach you a lot about the sport. And that's the camp that Letourneau fell in for me.
All right, that's gonna wrap up our look at the the Bruins prospect pool. Our next video will be about the Buffalo Sabres. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to our channel. Tons of video are coming up. And thank you for all the subscribers that like support us. Since we start really making more YouTube video, basically at the start of last year. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you guys for the Buffalo Sabres in a few days.
Take care, everybody.